welcome to the Forward to Dawn podcast, the show all about exploring the fiction of the Halo universe. This is episode 28. I'm David, and I'm joined by my co-host Dani.
Hi, Leho.
And this week, I'm joined by our guest Haruspis.
Hello, again.
So we've got Haruspis on this week to talk about the most recent novel in the Halo universe, Renegades by Kelly Gay, which came out in mid-February. And this is a meaty book.
A little bit, tiny bit, one of those sort of confidence points in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I was thinking, looking back at some of our old stuff, when Silentium came out.
Well, that is a while back.
Yeah, I mentioned that at the time. It was like, all right, well, if the Halo universe had to end, this would have been the book that would have closed everything out and been fine with, because it wrapped up a whole lot of stuff. It moved things forward. It seems like it tied up a bunch of stuff. And while I don't think this really feels like it's wrapping things up, obviously, it does feel like, to me, the most consequential Halo novel since Silentium.
It's one of those, going back to the end of Halo 1, I think we're just getting started kind of moments.
But like, in terms of, we have lots of, the great thing about the expanded universe is you have these little side stories, you have stuff like that, but that it's just got that sort of, here, let's all these long plot points that have been sitting around since 2012, I think.
Or even earlier than that.
Well, yeah, some of it even earlier. Or when was Primordium? 2011 or 2012?
That was 2012, but of course there were the data drops set up for Primordium, I recall, probably around 2011, around Halo 1 anniversary.
Yeah. I guess the other surprising thing to me was that this was, for being a such consequential novel, it was a Kelly Gay novel, just because her previous book was a short story in Halo Fractures that got expanded into Halo Smoke and Shadow. And it's a good book. I liked it, but it was also, aside from tying into Halo Wars a bit, it wasn't what I would consider like one of those consequential novels you have to read to kick the universe going forward. So that surprised me.
Fractures started off with a lot of sort of like prologue kind of stories, and Into the Fire obviously set up that I say larger in air quotes because it was only about 98 pages in Smoke and Shadow.
Yeah.
And it was like there was really an appetite after that for more Kelly Gay, because she did such an amazing job with so few pages in that story. And then here we are with an almost 400 page novel.
Yeah, it's big.
400 pages.
It's meaty. And I actually didn't reread, considering it was only 90 pages. I should have, but I didn't reread Smoke and Shadow before this, which I find actually kind of helpful, because the book we talked about on our last episode, 27, with Def Guru, I mentioned that a lot of the novels seem to be putting in more effort in trying to be accessible to people who hadn't read a Halo novel before, and I'm not sure how you would pick one of these up, really.
That was the same with New Blood as well, where basically part of the book just recaps ODST.
Yeah, and so in this way, you get it starts out with a basically previously on Halo Fractures and Halo Smoke and Shadow stuff, just like a lot of the other books recently have. But it also takes time out to recap pretty much the events of sort of kind of the Forerunner trilogy and sort of kind of Hunters in the Dark at a period. Which I found fine. And also, it helped that there was the in-universe conceit of these people just don't know anything. They are not Halo readers. They are just scavengers. So it worked in that sense.
Yeah, I think you've got a really great contrast there of, you've got Annabelle Richards and the sort of established kind of characters from the past who are who they know the game, they know what's going on. And then you're primarily following these characters who are very small, they're just scavengers, and they find themselves in this ever escalating series of events that eventually comes to span universe spanning events.
Yeah, they kind of, it's almost like they sort of accidentally walked into one of the Halo video games. Obviously, this isn't a game, but in terms of like big events, it sort of feels like that. And especially since this book pretty much happens concurrently with Halo 4.
Mm.
So you get like these little teases of setups for Halo, what's going on in Halo 4, and setups for Spartan Ops.
Oh, with Gek.
Yep, with Gek, who
Good old
returns. Yeah, so I had totally forgotten most of the stuff besides, all right, they're scavengers and they fought some guys and they found the Spirit of Fire's buoy that they left in Arcadia and ended up getting lost.
And funnily enough, that's all you really need.
Yeah, and
going
I
into the
think
story.
that's the thing, that in general, I don't think Halo is particularly, except within like the tight knit trilogies, like the Forerunner trilogy, it's never really been at its best when you had to read a bunch of stuff to catch up. And I think in this way, it definitely I never felt like, wait, who's that person? Actually, the only part I felt like that was when it came to Annabelle Richards, who I'd totally forgotten was a character in Hunters in the Dark, which, looking back, had a lot of characters.
Yes, it had something like almost 24 or something that they were.
Yeah, because it had the Spartans. It had it was setting up Vale. It had the Halo 3 elites, who I always forget the name of. It had the Spartan 4s. It had all those scientists, the scientist who dies, the scientist who doesn't die, Annabelle Richards, who I forgot about. So yeah, there was a lot going on there.
Not to forget the cyborg Bobby as well.
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was a thing that happened.
Well, this book has lots of things that happen too. Maybe not in as
Indeed.
negative a form, but definitely things I did not expect.
Yes.
So we'll get right into it. So it starts off. That was one of the interesting things. If you haven't read a Halo book or not intimately familiar, starting off, you get a prologue and these interstitials throughout, told from the point of view of an initially unknown character. Although if you know much about Halo, I think Kelly Gay does a good enough job with hitting some of the little hints of 343 Guilty Spark's mannerisms that you could pick it up even before this gets revealed later.
Especially at the very end of that little passage where he goes ho hum.
Yeah,
because that's a very Guilty Spark kind of thing to say.
Yeah, that little sing-songy, chirpy nature. You could hear that in her voice. But Chakas, 343 Guilty Spark, unknown character at this point, is broadcasting a distress call, and also something that is not entirely clear if you're new, but if you have some familiarity, you realize he's in an Armiger's body that he's sort of downloaded himself into because he accidentally crashed the ship he was in and killed it.
Of course he did.
Yeah, and I like that. In overall, I think for a character piece, this does a really good job of showing how even when 343 Guilty Spark, or Spark as he just gets shortened to here, is on your side, that's really not necessarily great for you because things might just happen and he's like forgotten what it's like to be a flesh bag and people just die.
And that's one of like the most fascinating aspects of his character, because he's not even like actively trying to, harm anyone here. It's just like, oh, I'm sorry, that just happened.
Yeah. But we kick up back to, it's March 2557. And actually, this book takes place over a pretty long period of time compared to some of the previous ones.
I was surprised by that, yeah.
Yeah, it starts off in March. It goes through all the events of Halo 4. It starts off with the previously. And basically, there's the previously on is partially done by a Oni agent's log on Venezia. This is one of the members of Rion Forge's salvager crew who is actually a plant. And he reveals that like they've discovered the ruins of this installation following the Spirit of Fire's buoy, which we know is Etran Harborage, where Halo Wars took place, and then in true UNSC fashion, they blew it up. And there's a fragmented AI there a luminary that they discovered, along with Gek, our favorite goofy looking elite who actually becomes a character in these books, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, I was surprised in Smoke and Shadow when he showed up and the amount of backstory we got from him, like the scar on his eye and everything that we see in Spartan Mops. That was some nice little touches there.
Yeah, so we find out that Rion inflicted on him, trying to kill him, did not, because he killed her friend, and was sad. And so yeah, the AI is Little Bit, as they nickname him. And it skips ahead to May, and basically Rion and Nico, the salvager crew, are here. They're hiding out and repairing her ship, the Ace of Spades, because Little Bit, in the usual Forerunner AIs, try and help, and whatever happens, fried their FTL drive. And this is a new, which gets into the so many colonies that somehow survive the Covenant War and pop up, which kind of irks me, but they do at least a decent job here setting it up as a unique place. Kamoya, I believe it's called.
Yes.
And it's basically, it started with a colony vessel that became like the capital city of this place, and they've sort of built onto it from there. It kind of, the description sort of reminded me of like the Boneyard and Exile maps in Halo Reach and Halo 4, just like these pieces kind of lying around and going in and out of these ships that are sort of streets.
I'd love to see that like in proper form in a game. That'd be really cool.
Yeah,
it's not an original idea having a massive ship be the basis of a colony, but I really like the idea. I really like the mental image it puts in your head of it.
Yeah, and actually that's one of those little touches. A couple show up later that actually give this book a bit more of a cyberpunk feel at places.
I get that,
because this is less common in the Halo universe, and it sort of reminds me of that.
I was going to say that actually. Yeah, it feels weird at points, and that's what I really like is when Halo does weird.
Yeah, and more weird will come up. So they lost, what's his name?
Cade.
Cade.
Not Cade 6, but the other Cade.
Yeah, not Destiny Cade, but other Cade. And once again, if you don't really need to remember that from Smoke and Shadow, but what comes up is that he's gone. His absence affects the Ace of Spades crew, and that's really his absence is felt, and that's what drives a lot of character motivations. But luckily, there's a replacement in Ram Shalva who shows up because he's lost his ship, and his little character thing is after having everybody on his watch die, he's not so interested in going through that again, so he just wants to join Rion's crew. And so basically, they're on this planet because they got a plan to get back at Gek through the use of this auction. And so we get, once again, let's talk about the neo-cyberpunky or stuff that is less common in Halo. They have disposable translators, which I don't think we've ever seen before, to facilitate this stuff. In the continued make Halo Nightfall relevant corner, we have a Yonet.
We have several Yonhets.
Yeah, and they spend time. This is in terms of shove in a Star Trek alien that kind of got thrown into Nightfall and people thought was weird, but justify it after the fact. Rion actually has more familiarity with them because they're supposed to be like the kind of shifty wheelers and dealers, and after the Covenants collapse, that's what they're doing here. They're basically the auctioneers.
I like the Yonhet.
In terms of design, or
them. I just like I like the idea of them. I don't mind the design. I think when you're working with like television stuff and alien races, you're inevitably going to end up with things like that. I don't find it hugely off-brand, to be honest, for the series. I still watch 60s Doctor Who. I don't, it's not something I mind too much.
I mean, I like my Star Trek and rubber four-headed aliens too, but it is a little disappointing in terms of, when you have a franchise primarily based in games where that hasn't been an issue. Like if they had made the Yonette look like the weird, I still really like Shikai Wang's original designs for the jackals, were these like weird elongated things when they were supposed to just basically be sniper rifles, so they looked kind of like sniper rifles. Stuff like that. I didn't realize the flip side of that is, I guess we would have gotten bad CG like the Elite, and everyone would have been complaining about that instead.
It's a lose-lose situation, really, wherever you go with it.
And in terms of bad things about Halo Nightfall, that's really not on the top of the list. So, yeah.
I honestly didn't mind. I like the fact that they remembered. They aren't going to just drop.
Well, Cortana remembered them, and then Buck remembered them, and now Kelly Gay remembers them.
Everyone remembers them. It's so coincidental.
Remember those weird guys?
They're taken over.
Yeah, or they were also in Escalation, so they've been backfilled in pretty well. Or I shouldn't say they've been backfilled in. They've pretty much treated them as like, yeah, these guys were nothing you heard about during the Covenant, but when it fell, we found out about these guys, and that's fine. Okay, yeah, and then so we get introduced to our first group of UNSC guys who are going to be at odds with the Ace of Spades, the Ace of Spades crew. It's the UNSC Turokado.
Yes,
sounds right. With Agent Han. They mention here that you get a tie-in to Last Light and Retribution, that they were out at Gao. And they basically get pinged to Kamoya because in order for Rion to enact her revenge, she has to go through a credit check to get into the auction, and that brings everybody there.
I've got to say, I really love this setup because, I mean, revenge is a pretty common theme in Halo. It's one of like the major, I think, themes of the series. So beginning with that to sort of kick the story off, but then branching away from it as the narrative goes on to find some kind of peace. I thought, like, as for the book as a whole, was really nice.
Yeah, well, it also starts basically with a heist.
Yeah.
Which is less common in Halo. So you get all the players pretty much, except for Gek. I mean, there's nothing from his point of view, but you're setting up everyone you know is going to come, and it's whether or not they can pull it off or not. And which, again, Oni arrives at this planet in literally an hour in Slit Space, which is another one of my arg. Slit Space is too small now. But at least they lampshade it. They mention, oh, well, it was so fortunate it was on this corridor so we could get here so fast. So if you're gonna do that, at least hang a lantern on it. And so basically, Rion's going in alone inside the auction vault, and in another little cyberpunk touch, she's got little data stealing gloves. Which they basically devised because you aren't allowed to take weapons in conventional electronics, but this skips. And that will come in handy later because no one knows to look for it. And basically, Rion shows up, and Gek, unsurprisingly, is not so happy to see the person who nearly killed him and nearly throttles her to death.
He's never happy, Gek. I don't think we've ever seen him like crack a smile at all in any of the lore we've seen.
I guess he cracked a smile when he committed that terrorist attack on Earth, but we don't know.
No.
Or when when he escaped the Midnight Facility, which I guess is still the short story remaining for his. We don't know how he did that. But the Yonette, Eld, I think his name, steps in and just like, no, you can't. Gentlemen, no fighting in the war room. And the auction is for a harvester. So for people who remember the giant contraption in Halo 4 Spartan Ops, that I really thought was going to be like some weird precursor thing. But
I'm glad you mentioned that because in my non-spoiler review, I posted some teasers for the book, and one of them was that Gek by something that definitely isn't a precursor. Because if you remember that whole time when the trailer for the second half of Spartanauts was dropped, it was like, oh, the precursors are going to be in Spartanauts.
It was like, was it a primordial, or is it like one of their like organic? No, it's just the Halo 4's Covenant stuff is kind of weird and more insectoid. But they make out like, hey, this is a really dangerous weapon that you could do lots of sort of stuff with. You could, if you let it, they give the detail, like if you basically let it go long enough, it could tunnel to the core of a planet and blow it up. Or not blow it up, but damage it severely. Which for Covenant super weapons is actually impressive, not for the Foreigners.
They do that every Tuesday.
And so you get this, and then so you get the whole scrappy thief versus the heart of gold. She's like, oh, well, our plan was to let him get away with a harvester possibly, but that could be really dangerous. But it doesn't matter because she's kidnapped in the middle of her plan by the Office of Naval Idiots. And they're actually Spartans who pick her up. And she basically says, all right, well, you're going to let Gek get away. He's a big deal. And so they head off to try and cut him off. And the Spartans are, as we find out, from Fireteam Apollo, which is a nice little touch.
And that's built up to. There's a sort of soft mystery as to who Big Guy, as Kelly writes in, actually is. And it's a nice little payoff for people who have been invested in that.
Yeah, if you don't know, their Spartan team, Fireteam Apollo is the Halo Legendary crates, is the universe conceit there, the fire team. So they basically Oni rounds up all of Rion's crew and the Ace of Spades entirely onto the Turricato. And Hans interrogates her and threatens everyone, so your typical Oni stuff. And we find out why Kip, her former crew member who was working with Oni, and it was basically because of Cedra. The attack there basically caused him to buy into Oni's plans. So that's another Halo Nightfall link.
I'm loving it.
And Han, they do a nice job of basically Han and Rion facing off, and Han sort of overestimates his position or doesn't realize that Rion is not the person you want to push too far, because she goes from threatening her and her crew to like basically bringing up Cade and talking about how it's going to just take everything that she has because they're looking for the AI specifically. The unknown Spartan is like, yeah, you kind of have to give up here, but you don't have to like it. But in return for all this, they're going to be free to go. And that Spartan's still in Novak, who, has he come up in any of the Fireteam Apollo stuff?
Novak doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah, the name did not particularly ring a bell, so I think he's new. But it's another good example of where they highlight the differences between the Spartan 2s and the Spartan 4s. That he's kind of a wise ass, and that Han has a sneaking suspicion that he could have stopped Rion from punching him, but he didn't. It's just, he's like, was he really being an asshole and letting her punch me?
I enjoyed that moment.
Yeah. So they get back onto the Ace of Spades, but they've lost everything. And for Rion, that's a huge deal because it's all her research about trying to find her father. And they get back to their base on Venezia and find out that they literally crated off basically her home there too.
They just like shot it up into space and they were like, right, this is ours now.
Yeah, they just like airlifted it off wherever. So she's down to the studs. But the key point is that she still has her fancy cyberpunk gloves and a plan. So on Venezia, they have the Kigyar Norfel basically get a favor from her to scan their ship for bugs because, of course, Oni has left all sorts of stuff in their ship to try and track them. And the nice touch I found was that they were even bugged with subdermal implants, and they just didn't even know, which is creepy and totally something Oni would do.
I've got a note as well that I love how alien Kelly Gane makes Venezia, because the issue I had with Karen Travis in Mortal Dictator is, I think, something that a lot of people had issue with, where the King Yar and that are like, well, as the humans say, and there was...
Hey, that was the Elites, and that was in Glasslands, not Mortal Dictator.
No, I had that issue in Mortal Dictator as well. I think that was kind of a through line in a lot of her world building, is that the aliens were not very alien.
But she still gave us Venezia, which is shed up a lot.
Yes.
And basically, she gets a superintendent AI, which I thought was interesting. They get a dumb AI from her and a data core that Oni didn't steal. And the Nico and Lessa, who are siblings, if you didn't remember from the previous book.
Illyria.
From Illyria, yeah. They fight about what they lost, because they lost. It's kind of one of those, a through line with this book is definitely like what you hold on to, what you leave behind. And they had taken like their baby blankets or stuff from their old life. And Nico's like, that probably wasn't, it really didn't have any relevance to us. Like, you came up with a story to make it have some emotional resonance because we didn't have kids. And definitely Cade was like sort of the father figure, so he's gone, so they're freaking out about that. But Rion's formulating their plan going forward, and they decrypt the information from the gloves, which gives them Gek's plans. They figure out that he's going to use the Harvester to tunnel into something he found in the Etran Harborage. They confirm that they were accosted by Spartans, and it's a nice touch because in a lot of ways, I think it was kind of necessary, but we've stepped away from the, oh my God, is that a Spartan? Like, kind of mythical status. So it's nice to still have.
Yeah, that's a thing of diminishing returns, I think, as you go on.
Yeah, so it's nice that it still has some, like, for these people who aren't in the military, they're still like, whoa, really? And they reference there's a incident in 2554, the Born Stellar relation. I don't know if we'd gotten the date for that before.
So the Born Stellar relation was how Halo Krypton was delivered as a story, and it was found within the Onyx Shield world. I guess it was called Trevelyan at that point.
Oh yeah, okay. And basically that there's something valuable on an uninhabited planet, Garanos A. There's this distress call. So basically they decide, hey, maybe if we give Oni like some salvage or something, we can get back our stuff, because they're going to want that more. And then we go all the way back to Voy and Earth in June 2557, and this is where Annabelle Richards pops up. And basically, since the events of Primordium, when 343 Guilty Sparks stole a ship, they've had this plan to try and trap him in a special facility whenever he shows up. Project Bookworm.
I love that title.
Yeah. And so it sounds like at some point they picked up the testimony from basically what forms Primordium in 2555, I believe. And I had a note here that she says chomping at the bit instead of champing at the bit, which is a grammatical pet peeve, but whatever. And we get they send Captain Hollier of the Bad Moon Rising is basically sends a team to recover 343 Guilty Spark. So now they've got this distress signal.
I've just realized that they really missed an opportunity here with Gek, because obviously this is a story about space pirates, and Gek has got one eye, so maybe Gek's got an eye patch at this point.
Yeah, it was not mentioned, but that would have been good.
Kelly, next time. Next time.
Yeah, and so the Turocado ends up at the debris field, the Forerunner debris field. And here I had a question where they learn the fate of the spirit of fire and whether that conflicts with stuff in escalations or the catalog post, because we got a catalog post that said that the spirit of fire had been declared lost basically before this. So I wasn't sure if it's just one of those official things where, oh, well, it's officially declared lost and they've actually found out what happened or not.
Yeah, that's always something to keep in mind. It's just sort of like the framing of everything. It's like, okay, so to what extent is this information kind of reliable, and where's the sort of source it comes from?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of Halo evolves out of unreliable narrators.
Yeah, well, and all those, the catalog and data drops and stuff, I think at this point are throw stuff out that we aren't going to hold ourselves to particularly.
Yeah, because 343 sort of realized that the catalog stuff was a bit of a mistake eventually. That, you know, you're answering all these questions and you're sort of locking yourselves in to have to tell stories in certain ways.
Yeah, like they mentioned the Shadow of Intent at some point, and we're like, well, wait, the Shadow of Intent's supposed to be doing this in this novel by Joe Staten. So, yeah, so there was some niggling details, I think, that weren't entirely consistent, but it's just one of those things. Then we get the character moments chapter with everyone on the Ace of Spades. As Nico's sad about losing his AI buddy, and you get the sense that he sort of spells it out. That little bit was sort of like the quote unquote compensation for Cade's death. Like, well, I lost my father figure, but I have this, and we're going to do so much crazy stuff together. And oh, wait, now he's gone. But don't worry, you're going to entirely forget about Little Bit by the end and get a new AI buddy.
Oh, yes.
Which, yeah, actually, it's kind of funny. Little Bit just drops off the face of the earth in this book.
Yeah, I think that's probably a valid criticism, is that he's basically not mentioned again throughout the rest of the book. And it's like, okay, maybe this will, you know, inform a future kind of story here. But you know, he sort of loses relevance entirely once the scale ramps up and it's like Guilty Spark, the Librarian, all this and that.
Yeah. And this is in a case showing where Slit Space moves at the speed of plot. This journey actually takes some time, not just hours. So other stuff is Lessa, meanwhile, is wondering if they should just leave. And there's some conflict with Nico about that. They mentioned briefly, line I had not, there's a Sangili board game, which I think really before that we'd only gotten the Aram.
The Aram
for their games. So they play board games too. No mention yet
it's
on
Halo Fleet Battles.
Customizable card games, but I'm sure that's there too. So they arrive in June 2557 in the system. And here they mention something that ties into Gek's backstory, is that he was imprisoned on the Midnight Facility prior to Spartan Ops and escaping because of a terrorist attack on Earth. And this explains that really how he did it was because he infiltrated refugee camps on Earth, which I had issues with the idea that the UNSC would ever let alien refugees be on Earth, honestly.
It does seem a bit soon, but I love the idea. They actually specify that it's Kigyar, Ungoy, and Sanghili refugees who are on Earth, which is a nice little added detail, because in Spartan Ops, when it's brought up, we didn't get the specifics of, you know, anything beyond, oh, hey, there are aliens on Earth.
Yeah, I thought the way I kind of justified it is presumably they didn't just kill everybody during Halo 3, that there would have been prisoners and stuff left behind with truths and stuff like that, and then presumably closely allied with the swords of Sanghelios. But it did give pause, and I guess maybe they rethought that after there was a terrorist attack. But who knows?
Because it's mentioned in Spartan Ops that they're all penned up, as Hoyer says, and that's got some implications around it.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a District 9.
Yeah, maybe they lock things down after that. We also get a nice one of the things I mentioned in our Bad Blood podcast was it was the kind of return of big examinations of inner colony versus outer colony attitudes and such, and that politics. And here's there's less of the politics, but there's a good bit about what everyone on the Ace of Spades crew thinks of Earth. And there are some who are like, well, I have no allegiance there. I wasn't born there. What do I care about it? Versus like, oh, well, you got to go back and see the homeland, the ancestral homeland kind of stuff. And I thought that was an interesting sort of look at.
It's really nice how it ties into sort of the overall kind of emotional arc of the story with Guilty Spark as well, returning home, that whole idea.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter how far sort of humanity has diverged, and the old human empire certainly did diverge to the point where they forgot that Earth was their homeworld, they come back, and there's a really sort of emotional kind of weight to that, and a very kind of romantic science fiction idea around it.
Mm-hmm. And we get some more cool tech stuff. They mention medical nanites are fixing RAM up. And they also send out Michelle the spy drone, which is one of those things where, yeah, realistically, we probably don't see enough unmanned drone stuff in Halo. But they set to work surveying the planet. So it's nice that there are more probes and drones and stuff. I understand why it's not satisfying if you just have a bunch of robots doing all the space travel and exploration, but it's a nice concession to reality.
You can do that more easily in a book, I think, than you can in other media.
Mm-hmm. And then we get our brief, it's Star Trek time, because we're going to send an away team to the surface of this planet. And they find the intact remains of 343 Guilty Spark, although they don't realize it's him yet. And we get a nice...
They've not played Halo 1.
And they're sort of going through, stripping it down, and you get... it'll come up a couple of times here is just like the ethics of salvaging, and like what you... hey, there are dead people there, stuff like that. It's not exactly a fun job.
No.
And they're just kind of curious because it seems like everyone died quickly, yet there are graves, and someone obviously set up this stuff, but they're not really sure what's happening, but they bug out. And meanwhile, the entire time, Spark is actually awake and cognizant, and he's plotting. And I thought...
As he does.
Yeah, and as I thought that they were really going to delay that, like, oh, the explanation, but in literally the next chapter, he just pops up in front of Nico. Like, okay. So we get a nice touch with the UNSC arrives at the planet, and basically Spark is like, all right, well, no time to talk. Let's get out of here. So he commandeers the Ace of Spades immediately. And then he performs an in-atmosphere slit space jump, which is a nice touch to the capabilities of the ships and stuff.
Yes.
Wait, you can't do that? Oh, but I can. And he sets a course to the Etran Harbor Ridge because that's like the nearest Forerunner facility, and nobody knows where he's actually going, so they can't tell him that's a bad idea because it's blown up.
But there's that element of dramatic irony for the reader who is familiar with what's been going on and everything, and he's like, oh man, it's not going to work out for them.
Mm-hmm. And we get from Guilty Spark's perspective, we get, or I should say just Spark, we get more of him like trying to reconcile being Chakas and 343 Guilty Spark and remembering his life as 343 Guilty Spark, and he's really not interested in he doesn't want to be him again, which is a nice touch. Even as he's driven out his goal, he doesn't really want to be the machine anymore.
It's an interesting parallel to Bornsteller's own character arc in the Forerunner saga, because he's got the Didact's wisdom in his head, and there's this whole idea of like, what happens to Bornsteller, and it's that identity he eventually comes back around in the Fractured stories to re-inherit, to reclaim. Yeah,
and so everyone, there's this standoff now between the Ace of Spades crew and Spark, and Spark basically fills in the Ace of Spades he gives them the plot notes for the Forerunner trilogy. And I do like that they lampshade how absolutely bonkers and goofy parts of it are. They're like, wait, that happened? And wait, what? And the crew is not really sure what they're going to do.
I imagine that whole scene playing out almost like the sequence terminals, like they were watching them. It's like on the telly.
Let's check the historical documents. Yeah, the crew sort of debates what they do. Nico's like, I have a new AI friend. And like, what about Little Bit? What, Little Bit who? But basically Rion's like, well, they'll use the drone has an EMP in it. So if they need to, they're going to use it against 343 Guilty Spark. This situation where like he's like, oh, well, don't worry. Everything will be fine. Trust me. And they're like, hell no. But what can we do? You have our ship, et cetera, et cetera. So there's this tense standoff. And meanwhile, back at Voy, Richards realize that they've been scooped. And we get your requisite UNSC squabbling over jurisdiction and stuff. The usual thing, like, oh, this is all your fault. And Han ends up realizing that he screwed the pooch because it was Ace of Spades. Who showed up. He's not sure how, so he basically has to go into damage control mode. Like, all right, if I find the Ace of Spades and capture them again, everything will be fine this time. And basically, they're going to make a deal to get back what they stole in exchange for the other stuff they stole. And we get Envoy. They have we get another AI who we haven't heard about. Who I liked. Ferg is dressed in a business suit, which
very Oni.
Well, I just enjoyed for the. They didn't have this detail, but I just kind of assumed it was like a 60s Mad Men or like 80s like Gordon Gekko kind of business suit guy, just because I find that funnier. Whereas all these other people are like proud Spartans, historic figures or whatever. It's just like a guy in a suit, maybe some real cream in his hair. And we learn that Richard's ultimate goal is the domain. And they learn about it. We learn that the details. So basically, this book tells us where all the Forerunner trilogy came from, because Silentium's relations came from the catalog that was with the Librarian and was discovered on Earth. And there was another one also found on Onyx.
Yes, a monitor shell that was actually in the intro to Silentium, because the big thing about the Forerunner saga is that each book is a frame narrative, and it's a story that's being recalled from some kind of source that only is investigating. And it was nice to have the domain come up here, because there's been kind of with Halo 5, when it came back into the setting, a sense that like, oh, we already kind of know about this, where it should have been one of those huge revelations.
Yeah, especially with Halsey mentioning, oh, Cortana got access to the domain. This is a bad thing. It's not really explained where she learned about that. So I'm guessing she knew about it from before her time in Spartan Ops. Some details were either given to her, leaked to her, or she found out in her usual way.
I'm happy to buy that.
Yeah. So the Ace of Spades arrives at the Harbridge, and Spark's like, what the hell? And they're like, oh, well, it got blown up. And they come under Covenant attack. At that exact moment, the UNSC arrive. And Rion gets to taunt Gek instead. We get more Star Trek in that there are view screens now, which I do not recall ever being a thing before in Halo, but I might just not be recalling something. I mean, we had like holo transmissions and stuff in Halo 4 and things like that. I do not remember view screens.
There's kind of view screens in Halo Wars on the Spirit of Fire.
That's true. Yeah, that's right. They do have a sort of a view screen thing with Forge on the ground. But so they slip away before the UNSC basically nukes everything, because I'm guessing because they detect that there's some residual flood. So I assume this time they've learned their lesson and just decide maybe nuking the Forerunner stuff. There's plenty of Forerunner artifacts out there. Let's just blow the hell out of this one because it could be really bad.
Points for Oni.
Yeah. And so they bug out, and basically Rion and Spark talk, and 343 makes a deal to help. He's going to help them, but they can't turn him over to Oni. And he's going to, but his plan requires some upgrades, so we get Halo Forerunner Pimp My Ride. They're going to head to a place and grab a design seed that will interface with the Ace of Spades. And here, there was a nice touch that we finally get confirmation. There had been some theories that in the Forerunner trilogy, they mentioned these crystal flakes are the heart of Forerunner FTL drives.
Yes.
And that they were cut from this giant mother crystal, and that was the only source of them. And people thought, hey, well, crystal, maybe that's the Forerunner crystal in First Strike that causes all these weird time spores. But the size and the location and the weird slip space stuff didn't really make sense. But here, Guilty Spark mentions that, well, there were smaller crystals they cut from the big crystal. So that solves the size. And then he specifically mentions, well, if you don't have it in this special container, it causes weird stuff, time distortions, and all this bad radiation, which pretty much confirms that what they found in First Strike is, in fact, one of these Forerunner slip space crystals, which was a nice...
Because it would be weird if that particular crystal was like a not very special one that had all this kind of security, like weirdness around it that we see in First Strike.
Yeah.
And it's nice to kind of get confirmation that it was something a bit more special.
Yeah, so that's a plot thread that's wrapped up since 2003.
2003, 2004,
yeah,
something like that.
Before Halo 2. So in the realm of things I didn't actually think were ever going to get solved. The wibbly wommy timey wonkiness of First Strike was up there, but here we are. So after giving them the whole explanation of the Forerunner trilogy, 343 Guilty Spark finishes basically giving the Ace of Spades crew the audiobook version of Halo.
One of the Reg version.
Yeah, well, no, I assume what he did is he pulled up YouTube and pulled up one of those like Halo complete movie, all cutscenes kind of things, just like this 4-hour
Waypoint.
Yeah, well, YouTube is on Waypoint, obviously. There's
so just spend 16 hours watching those cutscenes.
There's more lantern hanging on how ridiculous that Guilty Spark is narrating Primordium in the first place. So they're off to the planet where they can make these upgrades and hopefully hasn't been blown up. Triniel. And on the way, Spark and Rion sort of bond over their parent issues. But at this point, or around this point, we find out that basically Spark, from his brief time at the harborage, figures out what happened to Rion's father, that John Forge is dead. But she doesn't reveal that to her because he's afraid that she might alter the deal, won't go through it, etc.
With good reason.
Yeah, with good reason.
On both sides.
Yeah. And I do like, that there's really no reason for each of them to screw each other, but there's the wariness of, well, he doesn't really necessarily need us at this point, so there's this general wariness. What happens when you usually are dealing with people like Oni who don't keep deals? So they make a Chaka's hollow image for his Armiger shell. Nico bonds with Spark, like as everyone expected. That guy just really likes his toys.
He loses a father and he sort of finds a brother in a way, which is almost like Chakas and Riser in a sense.
Yeah. And so they arrive at Triniel, and we find out that basically, and here's another example of creepy looting, because they basically find just the the armored shells of all the Foreigners here because they killed themselves and everything on the planet to deny the flood.
Yes, this was quite a horrific section of the book. I mean, this book has got, you can say it's got pretty much everything in it, and this is where it taps into like proper like existential horror in a sense.
Yeah, I did have a mention. They talk about all these new life forms, and I had a note that evolution does not work that way. That in 100,000 years there would not be these weird variations of stuff that had been there before. But I was really happy that they mentioned different gravities, which usually almost never comes up in Halo. And the only time I think it's ever kind of been relevant is in the one episode of Spartanops where the gravity goes haywire when Requiem's being destroyed, which was a really cool point. And I wish they would do more stuff with gravity like that. And I guess the low gravity section on Halo 4 and the Halo Reach map. But they basically decide when they leave, they get the design seeds and stuff they need to upgrade the Ace of Spades. But Guilty Spark and the Ace of Spades crew basically decide to leave the planet without like trying to make sure it doesn't get discovered again. That'll just stay a memorial, which I liked. So they got their design seeds, so they're gonna to refuel and restock. They go to out of the way place called Myers Moon. We get mental images that I did not expect to see. Forerunner soldiers picking up sticks. Also later followed by Guilty Spark going dynamite fishing.
Again, it's that weirdness.
They're trying to fish, and he's like, "Hey, this is so much faster." Makes a gun and shoots it. And,
it's brilliant. I love it.
Which and then everyone freaks out because like, wait, he can make a gun out of nowhere. Oh crap! And like they spend some time like, hey, we have no idea what's going on in the universe. We have to connect to Waypoint and figure out what's going on. And she finds out that Gek put a giant bounty on her head because he's tired of them meddling Rion and those kids. And Hans left the offer that she realizes too good to be true. Like, hey, give us back what you found and we'll give you your dad's stuff back. So she basically she's been iffy on this whole upgrade the Ace of Spades thing, but she's like, all right, we're going to upgrade it and we're going to screw Oni on the deal. And at this point, 343 actually, Spark contacts the last catalog.
Yes.
Which was interesting.
The one that was on, was the one on Mars? It's part of a triad with the one that was found in Silentium and the one with the Librarian.
Yeah, so it's the final one. I don't remember where. But he basically, the catalog denies him access. And we also get...
Just like he did the Didact.
Yeah, which we get... He's like, wait, the Didact's around? Like, when did he access it? Like, not long ago. It's like, what? It's like, not a big deal either way. So that's when we know, hey, oh yeah, this is taking place during Halo 4 now. Because they're now at August 2554. And we head to, I believe, a new colony we haven't heard of. Out of the way colony for the trade with Han, Binterol. And they specifically mention at this point that Halo 4's events have happened. They're going to create a dummy Guilty Spark in this data core as bait. We also get them teaching Guilty Spark how to play cards, which is another mental image. Card sharking Guilty Spark. And so they basically meet in this place. Well, no one likes Oni, no one likes the UNSC, so we'll have guns if things go bad. Han and Rion meet, and the swap gets complicated as they planned. We learn important notes. Kicking a Spartan in the balls does not faze him much. And basically it turns into a giant firefight because Gek's guys show up. There's the Oni and everyone on the planet. And Spark ends up basically plucking Rion from the firefight, which I liked his little action hero mode.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to see Spark be able to sort of do things actively rather than just float around as a ball.
Yeah, well, and occasionally shoot things. Um, and I forgot that at this point, Spark has been subtly molding his facial features because he can do that too, so he looks less angry soldiery. And they also Lessa paints a spade on Gilly Spark, so he's got his multiplayer emblem.
He's ready to angrily shout at some 13-year-olds online.
Yeah, and in the chaos of everyone trying to get back, Lessa and Nico have a moment where she admits she needs to stop babying him, but they basically get out partially. So they have their moment amid the
because that's kind of one of the big conflicts actually in this book that really sort of like for people who aren't so into the universe are really able to kind of latch onto these characters, and we switch between those two characters' perspectives quite a lot. Like earlier, there's some really nice world building where the two of them have their thoughts on slip space told to us like through each of their personal chapters. So I thought there was a lot of kind of emotional payoff with this moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so the Terracotta shows up and like, all right, now I've got you, Ace of Spades, and then the Ace of Spades just jumps to slip space right in front of them, and they are confused as hell.
I completely misheard you as calling the UNSC ship the Terracotta for a second.
The UNSC Terracotta. Oh, that's tough. And so Rian was shot, but she's recovering. They toast Spark because he saved their bacon. And they're gonna show up in. They're heading to Earth next, the Sol system. So everyone's gonna meet there in mid-August on Earth. Richards is preparing for the Spark fragment. She's like, all right, well, we finally got him. Meanwhile, the Ace of Spades is now cloaked. We get another Star Trek moment where they land their cloaked ship and everyone remember where we parked. So they're basically just hiking around Kilimanjaro. And that's actually, I don't think that came up before, but basically they're saying that the peaks in Kenya are actually based on the remains of the Strato Sentinels who built the Ark in the Iris comic.
And Halo 3's terminals, yeah.
Yeah. So that was cool. And once again, how did no one notice that before now? But okay.
It's poetry. We'll go with poetry.
And we get more time with Spark reminiscing, and he's kind of being back home, brings up old memories, and he's kind of wondering what happened.
He gets very emotional.
Yeah, and he's wondering like what happened to my family, what they think happened to me, and just his relationship with the Librarian, because I think that's one of the things where I think Halo 4 didn't really touch on, but a lot of the books since have, is the Librarian and how she's kind of a dick. Like she doesn't.
I like to call her the sort of the last enemy we have to fight in Halo. Essentially, is her plan.
Yeah, she's wants to like set all these things in motion, and you're like, well, did you consider what we wanted? And yeah, she's got this very like Forerunner's burden kind of thing. Like, well, you're going to inherit the mantle, but that means I have to like decide how everything's going to work out and stuff. And now looking back on it, Spark's like, well, she just used me, and he's trying to find the Librarian, but he's wondering, well, is she going to use me again?
Yeah.
Which I liked.
Yeah, it really gets into the nitty gritty kind of like he has this love for her, and that is, it's not just something that's been programmed into him. He knew her, he worked with her, but there's also this knowledge that what's going to happen and what she wants isn't necessarily the best thing for everyone. It's caused a lot of pain over the years. Yeah,
and meanwhile, Richards is watching this footage from the swap, and she notices, hey, there's this weird blur, like, oh, that looks like a Forerunner soldier that I saw in Hunters in the Dark, and it's got an Ace of Spades mark on it. Like, god damn it.
It's like Bigfoot footage.
And they basically find out that 343 snuck into their systems from the video feed, and through Ferg, and locks down the base.
Retribution Last Lighty with Intrepid Eye, very similar to that.
I appreciate, like, everyone complains. I feel like the fundamentally biggest complaint with escalation at this point is that the Janus key turned out to be nothing, and specifically that Halsey hacked a contender class AI, especially because, like, the explanation of, well, he let her disable him as a test was right there, and they didn't take it. To explain that all away, it would have made perfect sense. But it's nice that they've been spending a lot more time, especially with Retribution and Intrepid Eye. Like, hey, most human AIs cannot touch this, and especially if people don't know what's going on, you're kind of hosed. The Forerunner does what it does, it does.
It's to be more powerful than the precursors themselves.
She is a precursor. I'm going to write that. The next Halo follower video. So finally, they reach this hidden Forerunner installation no one's noticed under Kilimanjaro. And Spark finally chooses the worst time to admit, oh yeah, by the way, your dad's dead. She says she does not take it well. And
no, to put it lightly.
Yeah, and I appreciate that Spark gets angry right back at her. And he's like, he has a great line, say I know nothing of grief.
Yeah.
Because she's trying to act all self-absorbed and aggrieved, and he's pointing out, like, well, everyone I knew has been dead 100,000 years, and then I spent 100,000 years as a robot being really bored. And at that point, they get confronted by Han at the end of this light bridge that they activated. But Sparks found what he wanted, and he just disappears.
Yep, he goes through.
Yep, and he encounters basically what's left of the Librarian. So, no, she's not alive.
And this was a big question, because obviously when Primordium came out, and Spark says, I know where the elusive life shaper is, who he thinks is the Librarian, there was a lot of discussion and debate over what that exactly meant, because we knew in Silentium, and the stories that followed that Chant Green became the new life shaper. And there was a big question of, like, okay, does he think he's found the Librarian, but he's actually going to find Chant Green and all that? Until that was all resolved in Fractures, where she goes off with Bornstella to another galaxy, and they have their child. Whether that was at all changed from an original plan, we don't know, but it was interesting how Kelly chose to sort of resolve it with this imprint.
So it's basically resolved by another Librarian ghost, Force Ghost, I guess. But it's basically it seems like it's basically linked to the one on Requiem, which is interesting because she
she says there are others, so there's potentially more than just the one on Requiem.
Yeah. And here, like, we get more of that debate between, like, what her plan is and whether it's work. And we get a good line about, like, she's saying, well, things I did for the greater good. And the greater good is merely an excuse for the strong to make decisions for the weak, which is pretty good summation of, like, the entire Forerunner arc and now the created, like, the rebuttal to the created's philosophy.
The issue of the mantle, ultimately.
Yeah.
But we do later, and I know you'll get to this, but we do get a very succinct little nod to the summary of the solution to the mantle, which I was very vindicated and excited by.
Well, we can talk about it now.
Yeah, so Rion says that maybe the Forerunner mantle of responsibility that they were so fond of wasn't a one race responsibility, but an all races responsibility, and the sort of gradual path of building these bridges with the other society. I can see a sort of like the Clone Wars, like the Galactic Senate, and that being the kind of end goal where the mantle is like essentially a new covenant where all the races in the galaxy are kind of working together.
About a united federation of planets.
Yes.
But basically, we find out really what he's going for. Is he wants to join his friends in the domain, basically.
Is that where they physically were going to? Because they were taking off, going back to their home planets, essentially.
Poochie died on the way back to his home planet. Yeah, that's basically like they're gonna launch off from this place. And we get a reference again to Bastion.
Yes. Though what it is, we still don't.
Yeah,
quite
there's
know.
basically like this idea that's sort of like the promised land. I mean, that a Forerunner was willing to get composed to try and reach it. But they have a talk, and basically the librarian is like, well, you can spend time with the force ghosts of your friends, or you can deal with your friends who are right here. And he's like, wait, I do have friends here. Those guys I just left. Wait, I have had a change of heart. And so he goes back.
To be fair, it was a very him thing to do,
Yeah.
wasn't that?
It's like, oh wait, I've changed my mind. Ho hum.
Spark is nothing but a changeable person.
Yeah. He goes back, saves him, teleports him out, and they escape, but not before Rion gets shot again. She takes her hits in this book.
She does. There was one thing that wasn't mentioned there, is that she gives Spark a coordinate key.
Mm-hmm.
That she says, find what's missing, fix the path, right what my kind turned wrong.
Dun dun dun. Yeah. They basically escape, and they actually just hang out on the planet because once again they're cloaked and they got a Forerunner AI helping them out. So unless someone literally walks into their ship, they're pretty good. And Spark lifts the lockdown at Voy, and so they find out, well, something shot off from Kilimanjaro, and like we're not sure what it was. And they're like, I'm kind of surprised Spark didn't kill us all. I guess that's good. Like we have no idea what he's doing now.
But is there anyone like living in that area at this point? Because of all the shit that's went down in Halo, living in Void's gotta be horrific. So it must be.
I have to imagine no. Yeah, there's. I feel like there's only got to be whatever the structures they rebuilt, and then like the janitors who keep that place clean, because it got glassed, it got beaten to hell by the Covenant, got excavated, it got presumably a bunch of ships falling in it from the home fleet fighting in Hunters of the Dark. So I imagine it's kind of a wasteland.
People are just like, you know what, living here is a terrible idea. Let's not do that.
Yeah, well, especially it's going to be great when the ships fall out of the sky, because then there'll be no risk.
Oh, yeah.
Rest in peace, Sydney. And so we get some the downtime. We have Rion sort of grappling with her father's death finally, and that Spark learned from the death from a buoy that Spirit of Fire dropped. Which is a nice connection to the Halo Wars timeline, which I don't think many people realized, but it had details. If you unlocked everything on it, it had details after Halo Wars ended, including basically that they leave final messages for everyone, and that. But even before that, basically when Serena realizes that, hey, going off to this place might be a one-way trip, so she has people record. I think she has them like she comes up with a pretense like, hey, not you're all gonna die, but she has people record messages to the loved ones, and that's where Forge's one comes in. So Spark gives Rion a last message from John, and it's your usual, I know you're going to grow up to be wonderful kind of stuff, but it's affecting. I feel bad.
I wept at this scene.
Yeah. It's a nice.
I wept several times in this book, actually.
Yeah, she does it. Kelly Gay does a pretty good job handling the emotional stuff here and pitching it. It doesn't particularly ever feel maudlin. It feels very genuine.
No.
One wee question here: did she see the other footage or just that goodbye?
That's the only part they talk about.
Yeah, because.
Because I know they said that they were watching, like Khan was watching the other footage, and they have more of him in action. But I don't think we actually read that she gets to see that stuff.
Yeah, I don't think they mentioned it. But they end with Richards and Iqbal, also from Hunters in the Dark, are examining their new Forerunner installation they got to play around with. And meanwhile, the Ace of Spades is doing a bonfire as remembrance for those they lost.
This was the other part where Spark says that he sings for Forthenko, for Gamelpar, Venivra, Bornstella, and Riser. That was another part that really hit me. Been waiting to hear those names again for so long.
Yeah, and that's definitely where it feels like it kind of wraps up their stories, and that it sort of kind of got wrapped up in Silentium, but it's Spark saying goodbye, the last person who remembers any of these guys, basically. Letting go.
It's a shame though, because one of the big things in Primordium is that the essence of Forthenko is still inside Spark. He even takes over the narration for a portion of the book, but he has unfortunately passed now.
Actually, one thing mentioned, I didn't really think about it until someone posted, and I think at the Halo Story Reddit, wondering what happened to the last of her kind ape woman from Primordium,
Mara.
I'm like, whatever happened to her? I'm like, probably nothing good. But that's just sad.
Hopefully
to think about.
Hopefully she was receded, her kind, and we'll find them in Halo Infinite.
Yeah,
and take on the enemies with that.
Or she could be the next Covenant species for us to rediscover in a couple of years.
Yeah,
like, she was there all the time.
Yeah, these ape people. It's basically Spark decides, hey, can I stay on as your AI because you need one, and they mention actually that Rion and the others admit that they saw the Librarian and parted stuff to them, and they're like, all right, what's our next mission? Rion says, well, the Spirit of Fire is still lost out there, so we should go find him because we're the best ones to find it. And it basically ends like a modern movie where, like, now you just have the slam cut to title. So it's basically like, and you guess we could be called Renegades title. But I appreciated that. And Spark gives a little cryptic tease about what's coming.
Yes.
Get you excited. And there's a final little, once again, like in your mid or post credits cutscene, little epilogue in December 2557. Basically, Rion sends Spartan Novak a tip on Gek's whereabouts. So basically, you can suggest that that's how Gek actually got captured after the terrorist attack, and leads into his role in Spartan Ops.
Yeah, well, that's reference where Hoya says some Sangheili freak tried to detonate a Havoc nuke.
Yep. We caught him because of Rion, so...
It was a nice bow to put on it. I like little inclusions like that. It's a nice way to end it.
And I think it did a really, overall, like, I really enjoyed this book. It did a good job with balancing the... I think actually one of the things I like about this is, and most of the books in general, I think really it's down to Troy Denning's work. We've dropped a whole lot of the military sci-fi part of things.
Yes.
In that, like, there aren't, I feel like the battles are basically like 5 pages total in here. We are not getting long digressions on the trajectory of Archer missiles and stuff like that, which is cool if you like that. But I feel like Nyland did it well, and we don't need it more. And this is really a much more character-focused book, and I am totally fine with that.
Yeah, because like we had Silent Storm last year and the recently announced sequel to it, Halo Oblivion. And, you know, for people who are fans of the more Nyland-esque kind of military sci-fi, I think it's great that they get that kind of story. But really my own kind of sensibilities and tastes with the franchise have moved more towards the weird, more character-driven stuff that we get in the likes of the Forerunner Saga, Broken Circle, that sort of thing, this book.
Yeah, and it seems like they've definitely... Their 343s, especially with how quick the turnaround on some of these novels are now, they've really got their set stable of authors that they're turning to, and each of them has their own little niche, I guess. We're
nearly at 30 now. I think we're in 27, 28?
We're in the 20s, which I did not realize. I did not realize we were that that many Halo novels until
We're
recently.
pretty much in EU territory regarding like comparisons to other franchises with Star Trek and Star Wars. We have that bulk
Oh
now.
God, no!
We
Star
have that bulk.
Trek has so many novels. You do not. It takes like 15 pages where they used to tell you which one you could get. There's like 200 for each series. It's crazy.
But the difference with Halo is that it's all held in this singular canon. And I think that's...
So it's like new Star Wars then.
Yeah, pretty much.
Actually, wait, hold on. Let me find that. There was actually...
I'm surprised they haven't gone back and sort of like Star Wars Legends, The Flood. I'm surprised.
You know, I feel like they did enough with the Forerunner trilogy, but if they were gonna go back and do anything, I think that is something that would have really benefited from the animated series treatment. Just turn the entire Forerunner trilogy into animated series and integrate all the stuff in.
Oh, don't say that. Don't say that. Oh, that hurts my heart.
Instead of doing the Fall of Reach again.
Oh, my heart can't take the thought of that. No, don't say that.
And it's going to happen. At some point, we're going to see another Fall of Reach adaptation.
Oh, God.
10 years from now.
The Halo Reach VR experience, you may as well. HoloLens 3.0, Halo Reach experience day one. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, so that was the thing just this morning on Twitter. Just Zachary 7 had posted a thing talking about the thing that he loves about the Halo lore is that the books, comics, and stuff, they could have all been cheap cash grabs, but they generally don't. They do the exact opposite. And I think that was my response to him is like, well, you really only have two choices. You either do the Halo way where you have a much tighter control and everything's canon, or you do the Star Trek way where everything's out there and you can just ignore the stuff you don't like because it's half of it's crap and be done with it. And I definitely appreciate the Halo way.
It's funny because Bungie really did want it the Star Trek way, essentially, when they first started out, because they were just interested in making their game, and a lot of that early tension between them was that Microsoft wanted to build a franchise, a series that would really launch the Xbox brand, and this is where we are now, almost 30 books later.
Microsoft won out, and here we are.
They did. For the better, I think.
Yeah. And so we don't have... I guess the question here is, because we've gotten follow-ups to all the other Halo books in like less than a year, when we think we'll see Rion Forge and company again, especially since they seem to be on a collision course with Halo Wars games, which in turn we have no idea if they're going to actually follow up in a main video game.
I hope we don't have to wait 10 more years to find out what happens next, honestly.
Hey, we only had to
keep
wait...
us hanging.
We only had to wait 8 years.
8 years.
8 years for Halo Wars 2 and
It
8 years
seems
for
like
sequel to Primordial.
yesterday. It was like yesterday.
Or 6 years.
Yeah. But no, I'm just glad we finally got something on Spark. I didn't care what it was. I was like, I'm reading this fast.
Well, and we knew something was going to happen because you don't name your studio after a character you're going to leave dead.
But you don't take 8 years to do something with that same character as well. You know what I mean? That you're named after, so it's a bit weird. I wouldn't use that as a defense.
I want Spark to show up in the games and like just do it like, hey, nod over to Chief, and Chief's like, what the hell?
You know, you could get away with that, I think, because Spark is just is the kind of character you can do that with. I mean, when you played Halo 1, right, if you didn't watch until the end of the credits, but you played Halo 2, you were like, yeah, I guess he's back.
Yeah, they don't even... Which actually, yeah, I always forget that Halo has a post-credit sequence like that, where it's just Spark showing he survived.
Yeah, he just flies off. The monster isn't dead.
I guess the problem is that now we've got... The Halo Wars already has its host of characters, and now we've got even more potential characters, which decreases the likelihood you could ever stick them in a game, because they basically have to be background characters. So I don't know.
It gets into that kind of swim lanes idea that 343 is rolling with regards to how they're handling some of the storylines in the universe.
Which is decently graceful, but at some point things are going to have to happen. You can't just cut them off from each other forever.
No. I mean, that was the issue with Halo 5, really, compared to the expectations we had with Halo 4, where it was set up like every book you're reading now is going to feed into the game in some way, whereas now they've sort of stepped back from that and said, oh, okay, we're going to go with
well, and I definitely think that was
approach.
a smarter choice, because I mean, with the issues, Karen Travis has her own issues, as the human says, but I think really an overarching thing, to be fair to her, that kills those books was the first two were mostly set up for Halo 4. And really, it was only Mortal Dictata that she got back to the themes of the entire trilogy that she wanted to explore.
It's funny, yeah, because it's like it didn't feel like Glasslands and the Thursday War were the story she wanted to tell. Mortal Dictata very much did. That felt like if that had just been the only book in the Halo 5 series, I think that would have been kind of enough for what she wanted to do.
Yeah, I think it was a lot better at handling what it was trying to do, but other ones, and to this day I still don't understand why they literally had it take place in 2553 when they had all those years to spread things out. But I guess the only thing is you did get off screen in the Halo 3 cutscene is the members of Ferret team at the Voy Memorial, just in the corner.
Yeah, it's
yeah. So I like this book. I think everyone else liked it, correct?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, and
the reception to it has been pretty marvelous, and I think that's very well justified.
Yeah, and
it's easily the most fun Halo experience I've had in quite some time, and through this book.
Yeah,
so
it's got comedy, it's got tragedy, it's got poignant moments, it's got Oni people getting their comeuppance. So what's not to love? A true crowd pleaser.
That's always fun.
Yeah, everyone loves that. And I mean, maybe we just got the next Troy Denning novel announced. So it's possible in like 3 months we'll get an early 2020 announcement for the next Kelly Gay novel. It's possible.
I'd be thrilled with that.
Yeah. Well, I definitely hope that we see more from her, even if it's not following up on these guys for a while. All right. Anything else? Last thoughts?
There was the Didact who got referenced. I just feel like I've always got to bring the Didact up somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely brought him up again for a reason. Like, you don't remind people about that sort of thing.
They mentioned him, but at the same time, the librarian Forest Ghost basically says, well, he's gone now, so.
She's asked whether the Didact can ever find peace by Spark, and she fears that he is beyond redemption at this point.
Yeah.
It just reminds me it's a little bit of foundation for certain people to make assumptions. Oh yes, he's definitely coming back. He's definitely coming back in Halo Infinite. Definitely 100% confirmed, you know?
Well, you see, he's going to come up with his own soldier armature, and then Spark is going to have to like evolve to Ultra Mecha Spark and fight him out in a Cardboard City miniature.
He's going to bite his finger.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's one of those things where you can take the comments as either like, yeah, well, that's the end of the Didact, or well, he still could be out there. 343 seems totally content to try and entertain people's alternate theories to a fault, like all the data drops in the Halo 5 Legendary Crate regarding Cortana.
Was not a fan of those.
Yeah, I just feel like you gotta, as I have regularly posted on Halo Reddit things, like I appreciate why people don't like Cortana being a villain. I think it's justified, and I know we have disagreed about this. But you just gotta stick with it. Like, either way, if you just like, well, actually, it was the Didact. Actually, she's been crazy. Actually, it's her Rampant Fragments, even though we never had Rampant Fragments being evil before. Like, you're just gonna make it worse.
Well, I think it would be interesting because in the teaser for Halo Infinite, there's a proposed time jump to 2560, and it'll be interesting to see what has happened in that time and where we will begin that story.
Mm-hmm. And we've already in Bad Blood basically wrapped up the end of Halo 5, so we know they're on the run and everyone's back together.
But we're still missing the context of that engine reveal, the actual setting for Infinite itself. We still don't have context for that.
Well, we've got how many potential Halo rings? We've got installation.
So it is installation 7.
It is installation 7 as the basis.
That has been confirmed.
But we still got installation 09 hanging out there.
We have.
And then we've got
2 and 3 and 6 and 5.
And then we've got the not Cortana, possibly not Cortana, possibly other AI chip from the end of the Slip Space Engine demo.
Yes.
So I don't know. We'll see if any of this reps in.
Yeah, so I don't think the book gave us much context for that. I think that was a deliberate thing as well. So we still have that sort of walled garden around Infinite.
Yeah, it definitely seemed, Renegades definitely seemed like it was doing a little bit of house cleaning, and finishing up some stuff. Because I think we've still got. I should write an article about this, but we've hit up like a remarkable amount of like a year and a half ago I wrote the top dangling plot threads, like listing them all down, like characters and stuff like that. And we've hit up Durl and Dama, like whatever happened to that guy. We've hit up the Sharkoi from the Conversation of the Universe. We've followed up on the First Strike Crystal. We followed up on Guilty Spark and the Rubicon. Like, we've hit a whole bunch of the long remaining stuff.
Yeah. We've just got to find out whether Janja Quom, the Sanshayim homeworld, whether that's still out.
Yeah,
there.
we've got that. We've got Mendicant Bias, obviously, which is going to be the Mendicant Bias.
But what I love with Mendicant is that so he's on the Ark, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Gravemind is also on the Ark technically. You've got the Flood there, so you've got these two like old buddies now turned enemies. Just sort of like, imagine them like sending hostile messages at one another, just like, "Oh, you again, you bastard."
Well, and that's true.
Psychic text messages to each other, yeah, definitely.
I guess the end of Awakening the Nightmare doesn't really, leaves it open-ended whether or not the flood threat's actually been neutralized or contained or not.
Potential Halo Wars 3.
Maybe.
Combust in the Gravemind.
Maybe.
With the Spirit of Fire and the Banished.
And I get the strong sense that Halo Wars 2 did not perform well.
Or like as well enough to...
Well, I mean, as well, but Halo Wars 1 was the best-selling console RTS ever, and it also sold like 1 million copies. So I think the big problem is that they tried with Blitz and stuff. They wanted to make it less niche, but RTSs themselves are dwindling. So I'm not sure we're going to get a Halo Wars 3.
Shout out to the team for really supporting the game.
Yeah.
Like, over 2 years on, they've done a fantastic job with it. And Fort Jordan, the remake of Fort Dean, that's so fun to play on. I love it.
Yeah, I have to get back to playing Halo Wars too.
It feels like we're sort of like heading towards a Halo reimagined in a way where we're going to have lots of new things to talk about, I hope.
Well, excuse me, Halo Infinite is actually a reboot, and
yeah, of course, that was going to be taken out of context, wasn't it?
Yeah, for context. Someone, who was it? Was it Bonnie Ross? Mentioned something about like basically like reimagining Halo, something, yeah, with the obvious, if you read the context, is like, oh, well, we want to make this approachable to new people, aka why we call it Halo Infinite instead of Halo 6. And people freaked out and said it was going to be a reboot. So, as usual. Okay. All right, thanks to Haruspis for joining us. Anything you wanted to plug while you're here?
So I've been doing reviews of Lone Wolf, the Linda-centric comic series that's been going on. We've got one more issue of that to go. So if you're looking to get caught up on some peripheral lore, that's something to check out. But I've got more exciting stuff coming over the year. Yeah,
cool. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes. You can check those out at FUDcast28. While you're there, you can check out old episodes or articles on the site, and we got some new content of ourselves coming soon. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Google Play, and you can follow us on Twitter and YouTube using the handle ForwardDawn. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.